Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, system check. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. I would like to thank all of you for attending today's webinar on effectively leading the modern procurement function. The original heading was leading the modern procurement function, but I changed it to effectively leading the modern procurement function. And it's an honor to be here. I'm your host. My name is David Millington. I'm the Director of Education for Next Level Purchasing Association. And this is a very, very, very interesting topic for a webinar. And I hope that you all would reap tremendous benefit from attending today. Again, thank you very much. And it's a pleasure and an honor to be here. So the procurement function has a very, very, very defined core purpose, which is to manage spend, support organizations or support operations, and to protect the organizations from risk, from the impact of risk. So our risk mitigation strategies. So it's a threefold, I would say, mandate or a threefold mission that is required of the procurement function. But so this is our start point. And towards the end, I would like to introduce you all to some other critical components or areas or dimensions, if I may, that are trending to be part of the modern procurement function. So if we could start and we could agree that this is the traditional view of procurement, to manage spend, support organization, support operations, and to protect our organizations from risk. To be an effective leader or to effectively lead the procurement function, and in many of the webinars, the prior webinars, I introduced us and we had intense information on what we call environmental scanning, in which we would look at our business or organizational operations to understand the organizational landscape or the environments in which our organizations have to function under in order to be successful and in order to successfully service our customers. So we see there are a few critical dimensions: socio-demographics, ecological factors, economic factors, technological factors, political factors, industry factors, competitive and customer related factors that bear down on our organizations. And it's very important that us as procurement leaders, that we understand these dimensions, and the better we are at understanding these dimensions, understanding these trends, and understanding how these trends affect and impact our organizations, whether it's a positive impact or negative impact, the better we are at understanding the current trends and the pending shifts in these dimensions, the better we would be at leading and managing the procurement function. So as far as socio-demographics is concerned, we see some mega trends in that dimension in many areas across the globe, many of the continents. We see a strong shift of urbanization and population growth, an intense demand for energy and for water. So this is a mega trend. And I know there's what we should say, difference of opinion on climate change. Some consider it a mega trend that has significant ecological impacts. And of course, as procurement function leaders, we have to be aware and we have to reflect and to understand what would be the impact of disruptive technologies on the function? How would big data analytics, how would blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, how would these dimensions and these technologies impact the procurement function, and what is our current ability and understanding and our ability to lead organizations into the era of digitization of the procurement function, and how would that affect us? If our organizations are behind the curve, how would that affect our business landscape, our organizational landscape? How would that affect our degree of competitive advantage? So these are things that we have to ponder and reflect on, and to be agile and nimble and to be proactive. In terms of the traditional view of the procurement service itself, or the industry view, is that procurement was seen as traditionally highly clerical and task driven. And in many cases, in most organizations, we would see procurement having less of a say at the table, where critical strategic positioning and strategic decisions are made. The procurement function, we would not be in those discussions to a significant degree. In some organizations who are more proactive, the procurement function, of course, is an integral part of those decision-making processes. So I just want to go back to the prior slide. So the power of awareness of our organizational landscape, this is what I'm trying to expound here. So it's very important that we are aware of these trends, and we are aware of what is trending in each one of these dimensions. We do our due diligence, and we understand that the modern business landscape is one that is entirely, it's emerging, and it's different requirements to maintain competitive advantage, and the procurement functions have to be aligned and have to be aware and have to adapt to those shifts. And for us to have that hyper awareness and that collaboration with subject matter experts in these dimensions is very important. If we look at it internally, and we collaborate internally with people who, I would say, who would have a degree of expertise in each one of these dimensions, the economic or the fiscal factors that affect organizations are our vice presidents or directors of finance or accounting. They would have a lot of those, a good understanding, and collaboration in that dimension, of course, is critical. As procurement professionals, we know that we have to have a good, strong understanding of finance and the understanding of the fiscal impact of our decisions in our day-to-day functions. In terms of the socio-demographic shifts that would affect the procurement function and affect our organizations, our director of HR, right, would have a strong understanding of that dimension. In terms of customer shifts and shifts in customer mindsets, how would that affect the procurement function going forward, and how could we position ourselves to lead effectively and to enable our organizations to create value for our customers. So in terms of the customer dimension, our director of customer service and customer experience should be a subject matter expert in those areas. So in terms of looking at this slide, some of it could seem to be a little bit daunting in terms of understanding these dimensions, but we do, if you look at our organizations, we do have internal expertise and understanding. Technology, our director of IT, right? We should have an increased dialogue in terms of the understanding of the corporate and the procurement and supply chain function preparedness to deal with and to deploy some of the digitization that may or may not be required to different varying degrees. So our director of IT is a good source of collaboration internally, and this type of collaboration would take us out of the traditional mindset that we adhere to, to procure mission critical inputs, to our conversion processes to convert into useful products and services for our customers, and that's the sole function of the procurement function. So the modern many companies are being proactive and being innovative in how they leverage the procurement functions. And I'm going to go into a couple of patterns that we see emerging in terms of how organizations are leveraging the procurement function. And we would have to reflect on our ability to meet those requirements as procurement function leaders. So again, the power of awareness and understanding our organizational landscape and understanding how well our procurement function is equipped, to what extent our procurement functions are equipped and ready to support the shifts in these dimensions. And as far as understanding the organizational landscape, again, we have to look at the trends. We have to understand what are the impacts of those trends on our organizations. And thirdly, we have to understand how well are our organizations and our business units and our functions, our supply chain, our procurement functions, how well are we positioned to deal with the impacts of those trends. If it's a negative trend, how well are we positioned strategically to mitigate those impacts and the risk? And if it's something that is a positive, on the positive side, how well are our functions and our organizations equipped to leverage and to capitalize on those positive characteristics? And then in terms of leadership, leading the procurement function, leading any business unit, leading any department, the power of credibility. So I would just like us to pause for a minute and to reflect for a moment on these questions. Do people consider us as credible? How does this affect our ability to lead and to lead the procurement of supply chain functions that we are mandated to lead? And how does it affect our culture, the culture in our department and the culture in our enterprise or organization? So credibility, there is a tremendous power to credibility. Credibility and awareness, the intersection of these two dimensions are a formidable force to reckon with. So I'd just like to stop for a moment on these three questions. So if you could look at the screen and just reflect and be honest with ourselves and answer these questions. So the next step here, I would think, in terms of effectively leading through awareness of our environment, continuously scanning our environment and being strategically postured and enabling our procurement functions to overcome any obstacles in our corporate landscapes and to leverage our own personal credibility as procurement leaders. We would have to look at what are the drivers, the core drivers of credibility, and what are the core drivers of building an effective culture, where we're leaders who we innovate and we build a culture of innovation, a culture of credibility, and a culture of trust. What are the core ingredients? What are the elements, the required elements for us to reach that point of operational excellence? So it's a lot of, I mean, this slide is 3 questions, but I think those questions give us a lot to ponder and to reflect on in terms of our leadership capacity and capability. So again, in terms of the power of awareness, it's, reflecting on ourselves and understanding ourselves, we talk about effectively leading the procurement function. Effectively leading the procurement function is a function of many characteristics and many requirements, and it starts with us, and we have to be the type of leaders that we able to internalize, reflect on ourselves, continuously commit to lifelong learning and improvement, and to be able to take these lessons and improve our environments, improve our processes, improve our technology, and of course, enable our enterprise organizations to create value that will enable an awesome world-class customer experience. But some of the critical questions here, again, to be truthful with ourselves, and then we start at this point. I think it's a very, very good start point, where we ask ourselves, what are our strengths and weaknesses? And we all have them. And then, what are our strategies to overcome those strengths and those weaknesses? Is the current state of our supply management system based on effective strategies or reaction? Because, in many cases, we're forced to in a situation of being reactive in terms of how we execute our processes, and a lot of times it's because we get information late. We're not involved, as I mentioned before, in the critical elements of the decision-making processes, and we get information secondhand, and we have to perform miracles to ensure the supply of our mission-critical inputs. So some of it are external, and some of it, is internal. So again, we internalize what could we correct in ourselves first, build a degree of credibility, and then we collaborate with our peers. We collaborate in our peers, our upstream peers, our suppliers. We collaborate with our downstream peers, our conversion or manufacturing processes, our logistics functions. We collaborate with further downstream to our customers, but we have to, again, collaborate with a degree of trust and credibility. And it starts with us. What could we improve in ourselves? And again, asking that question in terms of is our current state supply management system or procurement function, essentially, is it based on effective strategies or reaction? And then what is our role in that current state of why things are the way they are? And how ethical are we as procurement and supply management leaders? How are our skills stacked up against the required skills to lead a procurement function? And I would like us to think, as we reflect on that, think the technical skills that are required. And many of us are hyper-focused on the technical ability to, yes, we could do our spend analysis, and yes, we could design and execute our annual buying plans, and etc. Right? So these are the technical components. We could do the data analytics, etc., to execute our functions. These are the technical requirements. So what about the interpersonal requirements and the problem-solving skills? Because I'm sure on a day-to-day basis, we encounter formidable obstacles. How do we solve those problems? How do we collaborate? How do we collaborate with our peers, our direct reports, our superiors? What is the degree of how should I put, integrity in our interpersonal interaction, and our degree of collaboration? And as a uh, uh, procurement professional myself, and from experience, I've seen procurement functions where we siloed, and in many cases our functions are siloed. They're seen as cumbersome, and there's a lot of finger pointing at us, even with our tremendous efforts to make sure that we do the job to the best of our capability, and most of us do. We do an extraordinary job in making sure that we get our mission critical inputs at the right price points, delivered on time, with the highest levels of quality. But the question here is in terms of our interpersonal acumen and self-awareness, understanding of our environment, our credibility. I would less like us to ponder and reflect, and what do those dimensions look like? And then in terms of our knowledge gaps, how our current knowledge gaps, how do those knowledge gaps affect our organization? How do they affect the organization to really measure and understand these elements? And do we have an articulated and shared vision for our procurement function? So if you want to effectively lead the procurement function, and again, it's a function of many variables, and one of them is, do we have a vision, or is it more of the same? Do we look at outside of total cost of ownership, outside of cost reduction, price reduction year on year? Do we look, if we're leading and we're managing a procurement function, do we look at other metrics such as employee satisfaction with our leadership? Do we look at our turnover ratio? Do we look at these other metrics that would be indicative of other issues in our procurement function that in the long run could affect our total cost of ownership, that in the long run could affect our overall supply chain synergies? So do we look at things in a very balanced way? Do we look at and internalize and measure our process capabilities? So do we look at things in a holistic way? And again, to what extent are we capable? What are the inherent gaps in terms of our capabilities to realize this reality of leading and managing the modern procurement function? And what is our position on coaching and mentorship? So our junior buyers, the procurement professionals who report to us, if we're in a leadership role, do we coach? Do we mentor? What are our capabilities to coach and mentor? Right? Have we done any training or any extensive study on the dynamics of effective professional coaching and mentorship? Is this important? And if it's not in our mentorship and coaching and continuous self-improvement, if these are not important parts of our current procurement and corporate culture, then what do we plan to do to change that? So, and the last question is, how do we close any shortfalls from our answers? Okay, this is the what. So if we do an analysis and we score ourselves on a scale of 1 to 10 on all of these questions, and we see areas where I'm sure most of you are doing exceedingly well, but I'm sure from this slide, we have pinpointed areas for improvement. So in areas where we need improvement, then this is the what. Then the question is, now what? What are we going to do? What's the next steps? What are the next steps? So again, the power of awareness, of self-awareness, and a very important dimension for leading the modern supply chain. And if we are at a senior level, there are 4 critical dimensions that are required for senior leadership. The ability to think strategically, the ability to influence, the ability to build strategic relationships or relationships in general, and the ability to execute. So we have, for senior procurement leaders, we have to be strong in all of these areas, but we have to master at least one. So many people, for example, they're very good at strategic thinking, and their weaker side maybe execution. And there are many people who they could execute very well, but they're not relationship builders. They don't have that ability to influence necessarily. They're not strong in that area, and a lot of times they could execute well without, thinking things through thoroughly. So, picture someone who's a very, very profound strategic thinker, but cannot execute, then very little gets done. And what about that strategic thinker does not build relationships, right? So by not building relationships could compromise the ability to execute those strategic thoughts. And then think about someone who's very strong and executing, and they're not good in relationships. They don't get along with people. So just picture the type of chaos that this could create. So again, this is another area where we should reflect on and scorecard ourselves, maybe on a scale of 1 to 10, and to take steps to close the gaps. We should have a good degree of strength in all of these areas, but in many cases, some of the experts say it's required to be an expert or a master in one of these dimensions. So the whole idea is that in terms of our onboarding talent to support us if you're in a senior procurement role, would be to, if you're a strategic thinker, then hire someone who could look at your system and see if you're able to, your current procurement function, you're able to execute very well, but the weaker side of the procurement function is building relationships. And you're going to see later on that dimension is very important, to build relationships. And then if you're looking for talent, then you want to bring somebody in who's an expert in building relationships. And then as you develop current talent and you bring in new talent, the whole idea is to have a function or procurement function where your leaders are balancing all of these areas. So a team that has leadership that is able to they're very strong in all of these areas will be a very, very, very robust team. And then another question is, what do our direct reports want from us? And in many of my webinars, and we focus on, again, why do businesses exist? Why do organizations exist? They exist to create value for their customers, right? So in order to create value for our customers, we have to understand what our customers need, what are their requirements, and even more so, we have to laser focus and hyper focus on what are the most critical of those requirements, right? So in many organizations, there's and this is good, there's an intense or hyper focus on customer requirements, okay? However, it is very important that we understand our employee requirements. So if we are, and we plan to effectively lead the procurement function, we have to understand what are the requirements of our direct reports. Gallup did some research some time ago, and they interviewed thousands of employees, and they came up with four things, four major requirements that employees request of management: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Again, I'm one, I love to scorecard things. So again, on a scale of 1 to 10, right? And we engage, we collaborate, we engage our employees. Hey, could you, on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you say us as procurement leaders or us ourselves, to what degree do you trust us? To what degree do we uh, exemplify compassion in our leadership and our management role or style? And do you feel that the culture is one that exhibits stability? And do you feel that there's hope in? Do you feel that there's hope in your current role, or do you feel that you're stuck in a dead end? So again, it's very important that we manage the requirements of our direct reports carefully, and we manage them effectively. And we also collaborate with our peers, the other departments, the other functional areas in our organization, and ask them what are the requirements of us, the procurement function, right? So you'll be surprised if you have these conversations, right, and break down the silos that plague many organizations just by asking a dialogue. And again, one of the best practices from our 14 purchasing best practices course, and I mentioned it in the prior webinar, is the formulation of a commodity team, where we'll take leaders from the different functional areas in your organization, and I would even include our key suppliers, and I will also include our key customers, right, as part of the commodity team. And this commodity team would focus on the all of the elements that impact the supply chain and procurement functions. And then of course we should lead this team. And by implementing a team of this nature, it would also by de facto put us in a very, very, very pivotal point, or a very, very important position in our organization to be part of the critical decisions that are made in terms of ongoing support of operations, in terms of new product development. And I mentioned in one of the prior webinars, new product development is an area where a lot of the upfront processes, what we call in professional product development, we call it the fuzzy front end. A lot of those decisions are made without significant input from the procurement and even supply chain leaders, right? So a lot of the ideation processes are done with the sales, the marketing, the R&D folks, the finance folks, and then we find out, as procurement practitioners, we find out later on in the processes that after certain decisions were made in terms of product design or service design, if you're in a service industry, and then we are expected to ensure the supply of the critical inputs and components that would go into these new products. However, it puts us at a disadvantage. The closer upstream, or the closer to the start point of such decisions the procurement function is, the better we would be at executing our jobs and our functions. So by implementing, taking the initiative, and this is all part of leading the modern procurement function, by taking that initiative and implementing a commodity team, and again, use the crawl, walk, run approach, right? So some of this may seem daunting, and it's like, we just don't want to bother with it, but start small and have a vision. It's about vision. Again, as I mentioned, where do we see the procurement function in 3 years? Is it going to be more of the same? Are we leaders, or do we expect to have to see our procurement functions be transformed into world-class procurement functions by doing more of the same? tomorrow we're going to operate the same way. Next week, next year, we're going to operate the same way, do the same things that we do now. How do we envision manipulating and adjusting the core variables in our environment, right? The factors, the variables that give us whatever result we're getting now relative to what is required for us going forward. So we have to understand these dimensions and have a vision around it, okay? And an inspirational but realistic vision. Most of us as procurement professionals, we have the technical acumen to execute the function. We know how to execute the tools. We know how to use certain technologies. We know how to procure globally. We understand those processes, but what is our vision to lead our functions into the future? With the understanding, we go back to the initial environmental scan, we see, disruptive technologies all around us, including the procurement function. Don't think for a minute that the procurement function is not going to be impacted, and there's not going to become a point where we're going to have to position and to partake in some of these technologies. A lot of these technologies, it could be expensive, but what happens to technology over time, right? They become cheaper, right? So what does that look like? And then think about a leader who has no purpose and no vision. That is not an effective leader. So if you want to be effective leaders and you want to effectively lead the procurement function, the modern procurement function, we have to be procurement function leaders of purpose and vision. It's as simple as that. And we synergize this vision with our skill sets, and we continuously commit to lifelong learning and continuously improve and raise the bar of our skill sets and those who report to us. And we again, as we mentioned before, we practice cross-functional mentorship, and we ourselves we receive cross-functional mentorship, and we have that strong collaboration. So again, trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Rate how well we are doing in these areas. Send a survey, and this don't penalize people. Remove fear. You want to lead the function. Remove fear. Create a culture of disruptive innovation and change and transformation. Create a culture, procurement and corporate culture. Contribute to the corporate culture. One of we take risk, right? But we don't take what I call stupid risk. We take risk where we understand what we're doing, and we understand the impact of those risks, and we have a degree of control of those risks, but we take risk and we embrace failure. But right, we have to understand this word embrace failure. It has become, this phrase has become a trend, right? A buzzword. If you're going to fail on something because we want to test and we want to innovate, we fail quickly and we fail cheap. So we have to, put parameters of control around failure. And then, okay, so very, very important. Some critical trends in terms of the procurement function. And how well are we positioned to navigate and to lead our organizations? What are the requirements to lead our organizations through these, in response to these trends? So we see a steady rise of strategic level procurement leaders, leadership roles, the chief procurement officer, vice president of procurement. We see a steady rise of these roles, and we see that the modern requirements now are that these leaders significantly contribute to the design of corporate strategy, design and deployment of corporate strategy. So it's becoming a trend, you know, and the trend is increasing. So we have to understand corporate strategy, formulation and design, and we have to understand those processes, and furthermore, we have to have the acumen and the capability to align the procurement function with those trends. That's very, very important. So to align and to equip and to position the procurement functions in a way that it helps our organizations, that the procurement function is an enabler of innovation, an enabler of those strategic objectives of our organizations. And then we see a rise again in the mid-level procurement leaders, maybe in the procurement manager level, etc., or procurement supervisor level. We see a significant rise in those leaders where they have to design the necessary tactics to execute those corporate strategies, handed to them by the senior procurement leaders. So we see there's a growing shift in this. And so it's very important that we understand these processes. And we see an increasing degrees of accountability on procurement leaders to execute corporate strategies through supply chain and procurement activities. Again, the activities in the supply chain, they have to be slim, trim, and efficient, and slim, trim, and efficient in the execution of the corporate strategies. So the traditional siloed functional operation of the procurement function, we see this collapsing at a rapid rate. And of course, many of the technologies that I mentioned before enable and bring a degree of visibility and enhances the collaboration and the synergies. We see like the blockchain technologies bring a great degree of visibility and collaboration cross-functionally up and down the supply chains. So very important requirement. And we see also, as I mentioned before, an increasing, because of the steady, significant increase of strategic level procurement leaders. This has also impacted the product development processes. And so we see the modern procurement function. There's a requirement of early, how should I put it, the requirement of early input into new product development, and an increase in enabling the decision-making processes around new product development. So this is a very good opportunity for us, but it's becoming a requirement that we involve in those processes and the decision-making processes, which actually, as I mentioned before, is a benefit to us because it takes us out of this reactive mode. Remember when I started the webinar, one of the questions was, I'm paraphrasing, our functions, procurement functions, or corporate functions, are they our supply management functions or processes? Are they underpinned by effective strategies, or are they reactive? So, and then the modern requirement, and we have to be prepared to look beyond the price that we get for our mission critical inputs. We have to look beyond the price that we get for the items that we're responsible for ensuring a steady supply or procuring. So we have to look for cost reduction opportunities way beyond this. And as the last webinar on cost reduction beyond price, we went extensively into those dynamics. For those of you who have not seen, who were not present at the webinar, if you go online, you could request the recording and request the slides. So this executing our function and leading the procurement function way beyond price. It's a critical requirement. And the question is, again, a lot of the underpinning of this webinar is self-reflection, awareness of how we do things, and of course, to be bold and to take the initiative to change the things that we could change, and things that are a little more difficult out of our scope, that we collaborate. We don't put our hands up in the air and say we have no control over this and that. We collaborate upstream and downstream, and we be the enablers of the integration, the effective integration of the procurement function in the supply chain itself, and the integration of the procurement function with the other corporate processes. So these are some significant trends, and again, we have to reflect on our capability to lead. In terms of, again, I mentioned there's an increasing demand for procurement leaders, more so if we are on the senior level, but it's affecting the mid-level managers as well, who are responsible for designing the tactics to execute the high-level strategies. And then once you get to the operational level, the micro detail, down to the floor level of the procurement function, we see that, again, there's the requirement of the procurement function to be totally integrated and aligned with corporate objectives. And we see a shift in the types of KPIs, key performance indicators, that from the traditional price and quality and delivery KPIs, we see a shift in addition of critical KPIs, key performance indicators that all point towards executing corporate level strategy and creating competitive advantage and increase of market share. So again, we have to be proactive and understand these processes and understand. I love to be proactive. I'm not going to wait until the certain things are imminent. I like to be proactive and prepare for the near future. So in terms of, we have to have that acumen in terms of designing our strategic plans at the corporate level. Again, in understanding environmental scanning, as I mentioned before, the socio-demographic factors, the ecological factors, the economic factors, the industry, what's happening in the industry, the customer shift factors, the competitive factors. We have to understand, again, what's trending in those environments and what are the potential impacts, positive or negative, on our organizations and our procurement functions, and to conduct and to extrapolate and to understand and to be part of initiatives where the corporate SWOT analysis is done. And then we also reflect on our procurement functions, and we do a SWOT analysis for our procurement functions as well. And the selection of KPIs, key performance indicators, at the corporate level, at the business unit level, at the functional level. So we see, again, increasing shift in the required acumen for our procurement leaders, procurement function leaders, and how well are we prepared, and these are the requirements that would enable us to effectively lead the modern procurement function. And so this is essentially the process for designing and executing an effective corporate strategy. So you design the strategic plan in response to the SWOT analysis, the environmental scanning, processes. Then there's a selection of the necessary key performance indicators or success measures, or to measure the degree of success of executing those selected strategies. And many of the experts suggest that we choose no more than 5 strategies. We could talk at length about that. And then we design the tactics, or the tactical plans, which are the mechanisms to deploy those strategies, and then even down to we deploy the plan, and we focus on how to operationalize those strategies. And of course, the processes, we see a rising trend of procurement leaders being part of the strategic review processes, or some organizations do it annually, some are more proactive, they do it quarterly, but we call it annual review processes to see how well certain key strategic initiatives are being executed. So very, very, very becoming an increasing skill of procurement function leaders. This is a framework for the alignment of the procurement functions to the corporate strategies. So we see in this case here, there's a summary, situational summary of a particular organization. And we see everything there is numbered 0, 1, 2, 3. 0 is the corporate mission, and that is the domain and the scorecard of the CEO. And then we see the performance metrics to the right. So those are the metrics that the board, in this case, would hold the CEO accountable for. And then in order to execute this mission, and in order to realize this mission, in this case, 3 key strategies were agreed upon and identified to be executed via 3 functional areas. And we see number 1, the director of procurement and warehouse operations, and you see the performance metrics on the other side. And this procurement leader, in this case, Jason, his mission, or the procurement function mission, as I mentioned earlier, are we leaders who lead our function by a mission, by a purpose? And then the next fundamental question is, how do we measure the degree to which we are executing and realizing that mission? Well, in this particular case, if you look to the right, you see the performance metrics. You see there are 4 key performance metrics, or KPIs, that would measure the degree to which the procurement function mission is being executed. And then number 2 is the director of business development, and the strategy number 3 is in the human capital function, right? So again, it's becoming an increasing requirement for effective procurement function leadership to understand these processes, and to ensure that the way we measure success in our areas are aligned to our corporate mandate, or procurement strategies, or procurement our corporate objectives. And then this is create a purpose for the procurement function. We could take the procurement function and mission. You see 1, then 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and you break it down into micro missions. And then again, to the right, you have the critical performance metrics. And we have to understand, and we have to lead with the understanding that metrics drive behavior. So caveat, and I always give a caveat, is to make sure and look at our dashboards, look at the way that we measure things, and to strive to lead with balance. The modern procurement function is most effective if it's led with balance. And what I mean by that is, for example, if someone is responsible for, let's say, packing department, and that, and let's say it's a department that is, you know, somewhat mechanized, right? And of course, automation and mechanization is very costly. So let us look at this through the lens of the mass majority of businesses are small and mid-size, right? With, in many cases, limited capability and capital to automate every process. So there is a degree, a significant or substantial degree of how should I put it, manual or labor-intensive task. So, you know, a particular packaging, let's say, supervisor, right, puts stress or pressure on the packers or the pick packers to be quick, right? Because that particular supervisor or manager gets a bonus for keeping the labor costs relatively low, no overtime, etc. So there's this pressure to speed. But then by the time the products get to the customer, right, there are errors. So we have to look at the cost of that. Was it worth it? And we ask these questions. So a balancing metric in this case would be accuracy. So you're done quickly, but you want it done accurately. So this is a balancing measure. Yes, I see the things quickly. Yes, you got your people out on time. Yes, you didn't use any overtime, but you incurred significant cost. We had to expedite the shipments to products to customers because they picked the wrong thing, and on top of that, it was too expensive for the customer to return it. So the customer kept those products, and then we had to expedite notice. The expedition is another cost, and then we had to send the correct product. So let's think about the cost of a transaction like that. So again, looking at things, leading with balance, and understand that metrics and what we measure drive behavior. And you have to make sure we get balanced behavior and accountability. So we see that this procurement function here is cascaded down to the supervisory level, and each one of these unit or section leaders or process leaders have their KPIs, their performance metrics. So to be able to organize our functions in this way, the procurement functions in this way, and to lead them effectively by using methods like this to enable the realization of our corporate objectives is becoming a very, very, very increasing trend. And then another critical procurement trend is the demand or the requirement that procurement leaders are able to understand systems thinking and to bring innovation to their organizations. So we see a rise of, as I mentioned before early in the webinar, the requirement to look beyond, to execute our functions beyond the price that we get for our purchases or what we procure. We have to look way beyond this for opportunities. And one of the critical opportunities is in innovation and going upstream and collaborating. Again, remember we mentioned building relationships. Remember I mentioned that early in the webinar, building relationships, strategic relationships, the ability to do this, to go upstream and collaborate with our suppliers, not just beat them up on price, to understand their interests and why they're in business and why they do things, and to align their mandates to our mandates, and to look for opportunities to innovate and synergize, where we could borrow some of their capabilities, and we collaborate with our upstream and supplier processes, and we bring innovation to organizations. And we go, again, as I mentioned, downstream, or we bring in, we collaborate with strategic partners to bring a degree of innovation in the supply chain and in the procurement function. So there's a great shift in this being a requirement of effective procurement function leadership. And again, we have to question ourselves, to what extent do we embark on these activities? For some procurement functions, to operate on this level is a breakthrough. And then, which brings me into another matter. Do we have, in the course of our work week, do our direct reports, do we have any time allocated towards improvement and improving the way we do things? Or are we operating where we're supposed to be operating at 100% capacity? Are we operating at 200% capacity, meaning that we work double shift and we have no time to think about innovation? We have no time to think about the future of the procurement function, let alone are we so focused on the work at hand today? And then we have to understand, we have to reflect on what's causing us to be in that state. Are we what we call chasing our tails? Are we have we scrutinized the way we do things? Have we scrutinized our processes for what we call process waste, unnecessary touch points, things or activities that do not add value, activities that would not enable us to realize our corporate mission? Or do we have a high percentage of activities that would not help us realize our why we're here, our procurement function, right? To manage spend, support operations, and protect our organizations from risk. If we analyze our current methods of operation, do we see that that is a significant percentage of activities that are not related to that, or enable those parameters? Supporting our organizations, supporting our operations, managing spend, and mitigating risk. So do we have that capability where we could, my point is to understand our activities, look for the activities that do not add value to what we are required to do. And then if we look at how much time is spent on those activities, do we have the capability to measure that? And yes, those are very measurable, as we have seen through some of the other webinars. And then what's the next step, right? Because if we remove those elements, then we open up time and capacity to better lead our function, and to be innovative and creative, and to have time to collaborate, and et cetera, et cetera. So this here is a model that I would like us to ponder and reflect on. For those who would like the slides, you're free to have the slides. It focuses on 9 critical dimensions and it could be used at the corporate level, at the functional level. It could be used at the strategic level, the tactical level, and the operational level as it relates to the procurement function. It focuses on 9 leverage or dimensions of leverage, that if we improve any one of these dimensions, it could yield exponential improvement in terms of our procurement function operations. And it starts with, to the left, if you look at the area at the top, it starts with creating a vision and putting a vision and a purpose around our procurement function. And then it looks at another dimension is bringing improvement to our processes. As I mentioned a couple minutes ago, analyzing our processes, looking for activities that do not add value, remove them from how we execute our day-to-day processes. We look at our technology, and we assess our technology. We collaborate with our IT function. We collaborate with our customers. We collaborate with our suppliers, and then we figure out how to integrate these systems, right? And we figure out how to improve. Maybe our suppliers have a very, very strong IT function, and they're willing to help us improve our IT capability at a low cost, right? And to integrate the systems, and there's value in that. In terms of integrating the systems, there's value in terms of visibility and cost. There's so much cost reduction realization that could be realized from integrated systems. If you could do this at an innovate and a technology platform at a reasonable cost, again, we do our cost benefit analysis. We look at the ROI dimensions and we make those decisions. But the whole purpose of this webinar was to reflect and to build a mindset relative to effectively leading our procurement function. So again, we look at the processes, we look at the technologies we have, we look at what other materials that we have that we're using to leverage our day-to-day work. And then we look at the third dimension from the left and the green bar on top. We ensure that we have the right people. Because if we have a vision and we have the right processes and the right technology and we have the wrong people, then we're not going to get a good result. Again, Y, as you see in red, is a function of X, of the variables. So these are the critical variables or dimensions in our procurement system, our supply chain system, our strategy, the purpose that we put around our function, our procurement function, our supply chain function, the type of technology we have, the type of processes we have to reflect and measure and quantify these things. Do we have the right people? Right? And then if you go to the next dimension, do the right people, if we have the right people, do they have the skills to execute their functions? So to effectively lead anything, it's a function of creating a purpose and a vision around why we're there. To ensure that we have the right process, tools, and technologies. To ensure that we have the right people with the right skills. And accountability. And rewards and recognition. We reward and recognize people for executing their functions effectively. And we have the right metrics. Again, as we mentioned before, we make sure we have balanced metrics. So if you go across the screen, you see, and we have a culture of respect and appreciation and effective compensation. We ensure that our procurement our offices are ergonomic and efficient, and the flow of people and materials in the procurement space, even in the supply chain, if you want to look at it that way, it's the ergonomic and the efficient. And again, our metrics, are we measuring the right things? And then, so if we share with the right people who have the right skills, we give the right people with the right skills, we share with them our vision, we ensure that they have the right processes and technology to do their jobs, they have the skills and technology, we articulated our vision, we've created a purpose around the procurement function. We give them a ergonomic place, an efficient workspace. We respect them, we appreciate them, we compensate them effectively. We give them everything, if you look at it, right? Then we have to hold them accountable for performance. Without accountability, you know. So the point is, and then we manage risk. This is underpinned by risk management. So the idea is, if we have the right people, for example, if the whole idea is that if any one of these dimensions are compromised, we have problems. So picture having the right people, the right skills, right? And you have no purpose and no vision. What do you think is going to happen with those people? People get inertia, people get bored, they're going to leave. You're going to have turnover, right? What about if you have the right people, the right skills, and you give them vision and the processes are a mess, or the technology is from 30 years ago, or the technology is cumbersome, difficult to use, and it's often not available. And then the workspace is inefficient, cramped. Are we going to get results? No. Picked if you have everything here intact, but we're measuring the wrong things and we're driving the wrong behaviors, it will compromise the system. So to be able to systems think and understand that a system is based on what? People, metrics, process, environments, physical environments, culture, vision. And you have to understand your particular system and organization and look for those systemic dimensions and to make sure that none of these critical dimensions are compromised. So we as procurement leaders, we systems think and we contribute to a culture of disruptive change and innovation. So ideally, if you want to transform the procurement function, these 9 dimensions are the enablers of transformation of any type of department. Again, effective, shared, articulated vision and purpose, effective processes and technologies, ensuring that you have the right people in-house, ensuring that the right people have they're cross-trained and they have the effective skills to execute their function. You have an effective rewards and recognition and appreciation program. You have effective and efficient workspace, ergonomic workspace layouts. You have balanced metrics. You're measuring the right things. You have just mechanisms to hold people accountable, and then you manage and mitigate risk. These are the critical dimensions for change and managing change, which is another critical requirement for leading the modern procurement function, because change is right on the horizon. And again, I'm going to reiterate, change through digitization, change through disruptive technologies. How well are we prepared to internalize and assess and to improve our processes and to improve our systems? Again, a systems thinking approach, very holistic method, understanding that if you want to change what results we're getting currently, and if there's a change going forward or a change in requirements, we have to look at the systemic factors. Y is a function of X, X are the variables, and we have to understand which variables are the most sensitive, and you have to understand sensitivity to touch those variables. Again, we underpin this by risk management to guard against what we call unintended consequences. So the new procurement purpose. Remember, we started with the procurement purpose. Managing spend, supporting operations, protecting organizations from risk, contribution to the value creation and innovation processes of organizations, contribution to the development of corporate strategy formulation, as we went over, and preparing our function. And I put that in red, our procurement function for digitization. What does that look like? Are we doing our due diligence? We have the mindset, oh, digitization, technology, oh, the director of procurement of IT will handle that. It's not my problem. Oh, no, 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 no. We have to be front and center with that. Uh, um, and as things progress, we would be required to be front and center in strong collaboration with our IT functions to realize um, the effective digitization of the procurement function. I mean, who understands the procurement functions better than us? So in terms of user case scenarios, etc., it'll be required that we do our due diligence in terms of having um, significant and creating significant impact and in the decision making processes as far as digitization is concerned. But a lot of the indicators are it's right on it's on the horizon. In many cases, it's already here. But so this is the new procurement purpose. And I prepared this this slide from a question that I did on Quora. You could go on Quora and you could look it up. The characteristics of a procurement leader. I'll make sure I update that slide and put the characteristics of a procurement leader or procurement leadership. We see the ability to lead the procurement function with a vision and purpose that is aligned to the strategic objectives of your organization. Point number one, ensure that your team of procurement professionals are aligned with the articulated vision and are a right fit. You go straight down the list. Ensure that your team has the right skills to manage spend and support operations. Next Level Purchasing and LPA has a very, very world-class system called the PASS program that you could audit your team's readiness to execute the procurement function. For those of you who don't know about the PASS program, if you go online, give us a call and we could introduce you to our PASS program in which your procurement professionals could test against critical areas of the procurement function, the benchmarks, and see what they score on relative to those benchmarks. And we would see areas where people are very proficient, and they see some may have areas where there's room for improvement, and then they could take the necessary courses to realize those improvements. So again, the PASS program is something that's offered by Next Level Purchasing Association, and I recommend it that if you're a procurement leader, that you use it as a tool to ensure that you have the right skills to execute your procurement function. And again, we are responsible as procurement leaders to make sure that our people have the right skills. And to, of course, ensure that the teams have the right technology and processes, to ensure that there's full accountability, to ensure that managerial excellence is in place in terms of robust spend and saving strategies, to ensure that you have a culture of total cost of ownership, understanding, and excellence is the order of the day, right? So we look at things in a total cost of ownership perspective. This is how we lead, all right? We don't just focus on, I got a certain price point for a particular item that I'm responsible for procuring, and that's the only way I'm going to measure success, right? I got a reduction in price, and then we look at, well, the deliveries come in on time, deliveries came in late, what was the cost, right? If you got the wrong materials, or you have some suppliers that on a regular basis they ship us the wrong materials, how does it affect our total cost? So the total cost of ownership is the order of the day. This is our leadership style. And then We master a scientific method of problem solving. Again, early on in the webinar, right at the beginning, I mentioned the technical skills to execute and lead the procurement function. And you also mentioned the interpersonal skills, and we went into being able to influence, which is a very, very critical. The more senior you go, to be able to influence others is it's just as important as the technical acumen. And problem-solving skills. So to understand and to master the many problem-solving methodologies out there is the MADE model, the Plan, Do, Check, Act model, for example, that you could leverage to solve problems. And to master the science of environmental scanning, as we mentioned earlier on, understanding the landscape, to commit to lifelong learning and continuous improvement and influence a culture of the same with your associates. Know your stuff and mentor cross-functionally and be mentored cross-functionally and functionally. Become an expert in understanding your customer requirements. Remember that our businesses exist to create value for our customers, and to understand how you link your procurement function, you lead your procurement function via or by a complete and comprehensive understanding of your customer requirements and enabling all of the processes in the supply chain and enabling them to realize the customer requirements. And of course, mastering some of the robust tools and mechanisms to reduce supply chain risk. So here are 13 points that I identified for effective procurement function leadership. Again, you could take these 13 dimensions and put it in Excel, make a column on a scale of 1 to 10. Where you and be realistic with yourself as we started, which was our start point. On a scale of 1 to 10, you scorecard yourself, see where you're strong. That's great. Where there's room for improvement. Then the next column will be what are your strategies going forward to close those gaps. So that is the webinar for today. Again, it was an honor and a pleasure for sharing my insights with you in terms of how to effectively lead the procurement function. And I'm going to leave the flow open for any questions. Don't forget the PASS program, skills assessment. Very, very robust tool that we have. I'm sorry. So any questions? Oh. So somebody had a question. Anybody else has any questions? I'll be online for a bit. Hi, sir. How are you? Mr. Khan, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. So the course was very effective, and I have. Can I get all the slides?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because I missed some slides. I was stuck in traffic, and that's why I missed some slides.
Okay.
Thank you.
Were you able to benefit from today's webinar?
Yeah, definitely, it was very effective and very fruitful.
I'm very happy that we're able to serve you in that way. And yes, you can also get the recording as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you again. It's an honor. And where you calling in from, Mr. Khan?
Yeah. Actually, I'm here in Dubai.
Oh, where's that?
In Dubai.
Oh, Dubai. Oh, wow. Welcome. That's awesome. That's amazing. Welcome. Thank you for attending. It's a pleasure. Pleasure for having you.
Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Anybody else has any questions? Yes, I see somebody here. Hello, Rainton, how are you? Hello. Varsanovia, you have any questions? I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Forgive me if I didn't. Oh, yes, I see a question. Yes, yes, yes. You could get the slides as well and the recording. Okay, I see your message. Okay, no problem. Yes, you can. You can get the recording as well. You're welcome. Were you able to benefit from today's webinar? Your feedback is good. If there are any things that we could improve, feel free to tell me. It's not a problem. I'll do my best to improve. Okay, very well. Thank you very much. And please give us a rating and positive. Negative feedback is also means a lot to me as well, because again, I've committed to lifelong learning, and I take it as an area where I could improve. Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. Michael, how are you? Hello,
Oh,
Michael.
oh yeah, I I thought it was still muted. I am good, thank you.
Where you calling in from, Michael?
I'm calling from DC.
From where?
DC, United States.
Oh, okay. Oh, welcome. Awesome, awesome. How are you? How could I you have a question for me?
Yeah, and I actually typed it in there. I was asking with respect to the strategic function and being proactive, is there any quick IT certification one can get so as to work effectively with the IT folks in carrying out that strategic function?
Okay. I recommend you do some research on ITIL, ITIL. There's the ITIL certification, then there are different levels, right? So there's the foundational level, which looks at all of the key components of how an IT function should operate. And I think it's very important that as especially the more senior you move up, that you have an understanding of IT, because IT affects every process, every single process IT affects. So the better understanding you have of how IT function should operate and how IT function should position itself to deploy, especially new technologies. How should they conduct what they call the user case scenarios, solicit the requirements, the necessary requirements, process requirements um, for new technologies, and how those new technologies will be integrated into your organizations, to understand how the best practices and how they should go about that. I think it's very important that we know, especially procurement folks, because it's going to affect us, and we don't want to be in a situation where uh, as things go forward, okay, we're going to do blockchain, and then okay, this is what you have to do, and then how many times we have to react and learn new things, and we weren't part of the decision making process. At the end of the day, who are the experts uh, um, in realizing cost reduction? Who are the experts in executing the procurement function? We are, right? So we are the ones who need IT to enable us, not we conforming to some package or some. And you can't see me, but I'm moving my fingers with the inverted commas, some solution, right? So we have to conform. A lot of times, I've worked with solutions that are very cumbersome, and no one asks procurement, right? Well, how you want to look at your reports. How do you want to extract certain data? How do you want to analyze the data? It's just here, look, here's a solution, right? So we have to be front and center in um, um, and demanding that they ask us how best we think that new technologies could be used and how to, you know, to be very, very, to be involved in what that looks like, that vision for the future looks like, because it's going to affect us. So again, ITIL is
How do you
information.
spell that?
IITIL.
Okay.
Yeah, I did this certification. I did the foundational certification. I did it for that very same reason, to understand the
Yeah.
best practices of how IT function should operate. So this way I'll better be able to collaborate and to understand their interests and their situation. Um, in terms of effective business analysis, right? And we have to be analysts, right? And business analysts. And what is the function of the role of a business analyst, right? Is to bridge technical requirements and the business requirements. So you have some people, they're business people. They're not technical people, right? So, and then you have some people, technical people, and they're not business people. So they're not equipped with the skills and the mindset to make effective business decisions. Then you have some business people who they may have some unrealistic demands of technology. And procurement, we could be in that situation where we want some technology that's, is unrealistic, right? So to have to conduct good business analysis is the underpinning of those two environments, and making the business side and the technology side, bringing synergies and understanding of those two sides.
Yeah.
So my point is, you as a procurement professional, you'll be more on the technical business side, right? You'll see things more, right? If you have to get these mission critical inputs in to realize the customer requirements, to get the effective designs. So you're thinking as a business person, you're thinking as an entrepreneur, and you're thinking as a technical expert in the procurement function, right? But technical in terms of IT, if you understand the domain, the world of the IT people, if you understand, especially when sometimes they may use certain terminology that goes way over our head, but if you're able to speak their language, it'll be very, very, very beneficial to you. So the ITIL, and don't paraphrase me, the information technology uh, um, library. That's what it stands for, and it's a British entity. Very, very, very well recognized. And then if you want to become an ITIL expert, so you'll go through all the critical processes and functions of an IT function, of a world-class IT function. If you do the first level certification, it gives you a very good understanding, thorough understanding of those processes. And then there's what managing across the life cycle, and the different components in the IT function, right? Then you can go and get certifications in each one of those. And once you get like all the certifications, then you become an ITIL expert. So I don't think, unless you want to go that route, I don't think that's necessary. But to do the ITIL, to have that basic understanding, I think it would be very, very important, especially with we see blockchain right around us. We see talk about digitization, right? So, if other functions are being affected by this, right? We see look at a lot of the manufacturing processes, right, with sensors and you know what I mean. They're being impacted. So why would us as procurement leaders think that we would not be touched? No, we're just going to fix everything, and we're going to digitize everything. We're just going to leave procurement alone. I think that's not realistic. And my point was to be proactive and forward thinking, and to see what would that look like, and to have a vision. So if you want to lead, we have to have that vision, and again, we see a rise in progressive organizations leveraging their procurement functions strategically. So we no longer it's going to come a time where we are no longer the folks who spend money. We are a source of revenue. and innovation. So the ITIL certification, I think, is a good one for you. That'll give you that overall perspective and understanding of the IT function. And so once if for example different dimensions of digitization come to your organization, you'll be better able to collaborate and to facilitate and to lead your procurement function. You'll be better able to lead a procurement function in that type of role and to collaborate. That's my opinion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does.
Okay, so thank you very much for attending the webinar. It's an honor. It's an honor to speak to you all and to have you all here today. And I really appreciate your question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Any other questions? My dear students, any other questions? Okay, so that wraps it up for today. Thank you very much for attending. And again, it's really, you all energize me. I really, at NLP, you're very passionate. We all are very passionate about seeing you all succeed in your roles as procurement and supply chain professionals. And this is the culture that we have. So that's why I spoke a lot about culture. And again, thank you for attending and have a great rest of the day. If you all could please give a rating, positive, negative, I appreciate it. Thank you very much.